Good morning, everybody. I am I.Boto. I'm the manager of the CTA Brussels office. I'm also coordinating these briefings on behalf of the organizers, who are the European Commission, DG DevCo, but we also have our other DGs joining, the ACP Secretariat, Concord, and of course CTA. And we also have, depending on the topics, some other partners joining. So we are very, very pleased to have today with us as co-organizer IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute, because we produce with them and together with BMZ and GIZ, the Africa Agricultural Trade Monitor, which is a yearly publication on you will know more on the presentations on trade, and BMZ GIZ, with whom we have co-organized a few topics already, and who also have joined the IFPRI and CTA support to the AATM. So we are very pleased with that. These Brussels briefings, for those very few, I think, of you who are new, because we have regular participants coming to almost all briefings, I think we should give medals. This one is the briefing 58. So perhaps soon, you know, the age of retirement coming. We do them since 2007, almost every 2 months, calendar depending, and actually it's on topical issues affecting agriculture and rural development. Of course, mostly looking at the ACP countries for Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific. And obviously, we also have sometimes presentations from other countries of interest. Today, the briefing is not web streamed. We used to have them at the ACP Secretariat of the European Commission. Today was not possible because the rooms are occupied. But it's recorded, so all your presentations here and debates are recorded, and then they are edited per speaker, and they are all online as always. We will have 2 panels. We will be looking at some of the trends, the opportunities on regional trade, looking also at some features of European trade of interest for Africa. It's very timely now. And we will have a second panel, as usual, which looks a bit more into some successes coming from the field. So we are very happy to have Choco Togo, to have some of the cases on grains and cereals, on convenient food, and some others on added value products. So basically, we'll have now the opening remarks. What I would like 2 words from my side. Obviously, this is a very important topic for us, for CTA as well, for all the partners. We cannot deliver on SDGs if the part of sustainable production and sustainable trade, which go together, do not happen in Africa. We also think that due to the rapid population and income growth, the expanding demand for food and agriculture products in new markets, for example, in urban markets and others, should be, not necessarily is, but should be a great opportunity for all the value chain actors, and for us, obviously, more for the producers, who sometimes are the lowest in the chain, and should also offer many opportunities for employment, more specifically to the youth and the millions of young people who enter the market every year in Africa. Given also the amounts of imported food, we believe that supporting SMEs and local production is very, very important. The shifts, we will be very interested in some of the presentations today. You will hear again and again that Africa is still very much exporting within Africa, perhaps a bit less, but certainly externally raw products and not enough processed and added value products, which is really a problem. We do hope that Africa trade will allow for more processed food, convenient food, added value. The dietary shift is already much more on fruits and vegetables, for example, and convenient food. But we do hope that all the employments around processing, packaging, distribution, retail sectors, and so on will be, seized by the value chain actors in those markets, because it hasn't been the case on the export markets, which are very competitive and still very much dependent on raw products. We do believe that the regional integration, if implemented fully, will be another opportunity for lowering costs. Trade costs are still very, very high in Africa, as well as the harmonization of policies and regulations around the trade part, notably on SPS, food standards, obviously all the constraints on the transport and infrastructure, soft and hard. And hopefully some opportunities in manufacturing and industrialization. Of course, you will hear a lot this morning on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is the opportunity now, the biggest market in the world, actually, if fully realized. As per July 2019, this year, 54 countries have already signed the agreement, and this will create a very big, according to the IFDB, 3.4 trillion, economic opportunity, GDP of 2,500 US billion, and an Africa market of 1 to 1.2 billion people. And it aims, of course, at eliminate tariff and non-tariff barriers, accelerate the regional and continental integration, improve customs and trade facilitation, and develop the continental value chains. So it will be really a great opportunity, although you will hear that there are challenges and still things to put in place. An important part for us on the encouraging the value addition is the knowledge and technology, which obviously new knowledge will be needed for new products along the value chain, including, of course, the digitalization as an enabler for that. We will have some more from the IFDB on the trade finance gap, the financing part, which is very important. And with that, I will just want to, not in detail, because I'm at your disposal, of course, on the CTA programs, that from CTA we work across different value chains at national and regional level in Africa. We see it as a very big opportunity. We work a lot on youth and women opportunities, SMEs, bridging the gaps between SMEs and small-scale producers, organized farmers, as well as youth employment. All the use of ICTs is one of also strengths of CTA. We look at the impact. We will not talk very much about that today, but from CTA we also in some regions look at the impact of climate change on some specific value chains as well in production and obviously in trade as well. So our main focus is really strengthening the livelihoods and the incomes and employment of small-scale farmers across the continent, mostly through information sharing, capacity building, and attracting investment as well. So with these few remarks, as we are already late, and I thank already the interpreters in advance, because, don't be surprised if we are a bit late, but we'll try to minimize that. For the opening remarks, so W.Olthof is from the European Commission, is the Deputy Head of the Unit Rural Development, Food Security and Nutrition in Brussels. I'm always very pleased. I'm pleased to welcome all of you, of course. But I'm very pleased to welcome Wim for a reason, which is we started the Brussels briefings together in 2007, which means we are not very young, but we are still here. So I'm very happy that despite the fact that you went to delegations in countries, in African countries, as well as in Rome, you came back recently and you still have time for the briefings. So I'm very, very pleased to see you here. You coordinated as well the 1 billion EU food facility at the time. You worked on food security policy and trade issues in the Horn of Africa and liaised with the main UN agencies in Rome, which was, I think, your last assignment before coming back to Brussels. So again, Wim, very glad to see you and thank you very much for coming. No need to press the microphone, sorry.
This is modern technology. Thanks a lot, Isolina. And ladies and gentlemen, also on behalf of the European Commission, a warm welcome to this Brussels briefing. I do want to mention specifically Isolina for making again for the 58th time a very, very interesting program with all the partners, and CTA, and particularly Isolina, is a spider in a web of information and knows how to bring that together. So I'm looking forward with you to a very interesting session on trade, African agricultural trade. And coming from the development side, I just wanted to start with an open door. Maybe it's an open door, maybe not. But when we talk about trade, we see trade very much as an instrument. It's a means to an end. What we care about is the livelihoods of people. And having said that, of course, trade can help. Trade, if you look in history, then livelihoods, welfare and trade, increased trade, have gone hand in hand in most countries. But there's no guarantee. Furthermore, trade is really essential for most of our businesses. And for them to prosper, we need trade, but we need much more than only trade. So when we look today at trade, I would say let's look at it, but not in isolation. It's not a standalone issue. That's my first point. My second point is that obviously trade and Africa trade has become higher on the agenda since the Africa free trade, continental free trade area has been agreed, got agreed earlier this year, the ratification at least. Also this year, earlier in Rome, the EU Ministers of Agriculture, the African Ministers of Agriculture came together and discussed about ways of cooperation. And trade was high on the agenda. And in the discussions there, the EU again pledged to assist the African partners to come up, to implement and to move forward on the African continental free trade area. And it's not to say that our cooperation is new in that respect. We do and we have done a lot together, also with the ACP Secretariat, and I just wanted to mention two elements in that respect. One is a very long-standing cooperation on SPS, sanitary, phytosanitary standards, and particularly in the framework of an organization called the COAL ACP. The COAL ACP aims to develop trade in fruits, vegetables, and other horticultural products. It exists for many, many years, many decades, I should say, and has been of great assistance for companies in Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, in exporting products to other countries of the ACP world, but also to Europe. It has done that through capacity building of the entrepreneurs, but also recently much more capacity building with the national authorities and other stakeholders involved. Second thing I want to mention is that we do work hand in hand a lot on value change. In the last couple of years, we have also developed within the European Commission a tool to analyze value chains in a very sustainable, or let's say, to look at all the dimensions of sustainability, along with European universities. And that tool allows us to see what the good entry points are in value chains, including for trade in the region and beyond. Finally, let me mention that I'm also particularly pleased with the last two words of the title of today's seminar, a changing environment. And indeed, we live in a world with rapid changes in economic terms, changes in political terms, changes in terms of environment and climate. And I look particularly forward to the presentations today on how that changing climate provides opportunities but also challenges for trade in 2020 and beyond within Africa and between Africa and the EU. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wim. And indeed, the colleagues from the ACP are here as well. Yes. Thank you very much. So now the floor is to Ms. Y.Chileshe from the ACP Secretariat. She's the expert on trade and commodities. There are seats this way, madam. On trade and commodities. She has worked previously, before being at the ACP Secretariat, supporting the trade capacity at the Botswana, with the Botswana government, as well as with the Zambia. We work very closely with CTA. It's a pleasure to have you here, not only to explain what the ACP does, but also the significance of the sector for the whole value chain and the farmers in particular. So thank you, Yvonne, for joining us today.
Thank you, Zolina. On behalf of our Secretary General, Dr. Patrick Gomes, I would like to also extend a warm welcome to you all to this discussion that we are having on Africa's agriculture trade. I also wish to recognize the presence of our ambassadors from the ACP group and also colleagues. We are definitely delighted to be here today, and would like to thank CTA for this brilliant initiative. I think we need to consider to see how we can push the retirement age beyond 65, because CTA is doing a brilliant job with this initiative, which basically gives us a platform to be able to exchange and share information with each other. So thank you very much, CTA. So just to share a bit of information with regard to what we do as ACP Secretariat, and some of the issues I think have been highlighted by Will. Just to recall that the ACP group is basically a group of 79 states. We work closely with our counterparts from the EU through what we call the Cotonou Partnership Agreement. This is the agreement that governs our relation with the EU. And basically, it's based on 3 pillars. So we work together on trade, development, and political. On trade, we try to follow up on issues relating to EU market access for ACP products. Of course, I have to talk about my work. I'm the expert on commodities, so I work closely with colleagues on sugar, bananas, cocoa, and all other commodities. But we also try to monitor and follow up on EU decisions and regulations, especially the issues of SPS and TBT. And as Will indicated, we also develop joint programs like COLA ACP to try and see how we can address the issue of development. Our work on trade and development is also guided by 2 main documents which I'd like to share with you. The first relates to the ACP Private Sector Development Strategy, and the next one is the ACP New Approach on the Support for the Development of Agriculture Value Chains. This is an approach which was developed and endorsed by our ministers in 2017, and basically it aims at empowering actors along the value chain, especially family farmers, women, and youth. The approach is based on 4 pillars. It looks at issues on finance, capacity building, trade and investment, and climate change. So the question is, what is currently preoccupying our time? Of course, apart from Brexit, which has been keeping us busy, what is it that ACP is focusing right now? So we are currently negotiating with our partners, the EU, the post-Cotonou Partnership Agreement, as the current agreement that we have actually expires in 2020. So the new agreement will consist of a foundation and 3 regional protocols. So we're going to have a protocol on Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. But since today we're having discussions on Africa, my focus will be mainly on the Africa Regional Protocol. And I must say that these discussions that we're having actually on the briefing today on Africa's agriculture trade comes at the right time, because this is when our ambassadors have started engaging on the economic part of the Africa Regional Protocol, which looks at issues related to trade, agriculture, economic transformation, industrialization, and investment. On trade, for instance, The expectation is that the new agreement should actually strengthen regional integration by complementing ongoing regional trade initiatives, such as the Continental Free Trade Area, which we have spoken about, the tripartite framework, which was also launched in the region. On the aspect of trade, one of the aspects of trade that we have been discussing relates to the issue of trade facilitation. And the question has been, how do we reduce the thickness of borders? If we are to speak of increasing intra-Africa and intra-regional trade, especially in the agricultural products. Our discussions have therefore focused on the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, which aims to facilitate trade. But we've also spoken of initiatives such as the One-Stop Border Post, which is currently being rolled out in Eastern and Southern Africa. We have had discussions on the simplified trade regimes, which basically facilitates cross-border trade, and of course, the coordinated border management systems. Non-tariff barriers is also on the agenda. And I'm sure you all agree that if we eliminate non-tariff barriers on existing interregional trade flows, this would definitely result in an increase in regional trade over time. But I'm sure you all know that, and this has been captured by different studies, that when tariffs go down, you see an increase in non-tariff barriers. And of course, the sector of agriculture is not an exception. Agriculture sector, especially in most of the African countries, faces a lot of NTBs due to the sensitivity of the sector, as it is a major contributor to job and wealth creation. I do recall that during my negotiating days, we would always place the agricultural products in either the sensitive list or the exclusion list. So you can see that this is a sector that is very, very sensitive, but it has a lot of potential. On trade vis-a-vis market access, as many of you know, for one to trade, you need to have a product. You need to bring a product to the market, such that market access granted, if you do not have a product, may have no value. In this regard, particular attention in our discussions at the ACP is being paid on the issue of development, addressing the development aspect of trade. And now, of course, we're talking about sustainable development. And the question here is, how do we address the challenges of supply-side constraints, among others? So the expectation from our side is that the post-Cotonou Partnership Agreement will contribute to enhancing competitiveness, productivity, diversification, and also look at the issue of structural transformation. As I earlier mentioned, another area which is very, very important is the issue of agriculture. And of course, this is what we're discussing today, Africa's agriculture trade. Agriculture, we have noted, is a very good candidate for trade in view of its significant impact on wealth and job creation. According to World Bank studies, they noted that agriculture-based GDP growth has the capacity to increase revenues for the poorest communities 4 times as much as growth generated by other sectors. That is how important it is. Therefore, the expectation is that the post-Cotonou Partnership Agreement should make agriculture great again. How? How? By focusing on investment and transformation of the sector, which we believe will facilitate the rebalancing of global and regional value chains. This, we believe, will help commodity-dependent countries, like the countries in Africa, better position themselves within the value chain to ensure that there is transition to high productive economic activities. We note that our trade patterns are such that most of our countries export raw materials and import finished products. Commodity-dependent countries enter at the very beginning of the global value chain, exporting their commodities as raw, with very little or no value added to them, and as such receive very small percentage of value added within the global value chains. We have therefore agreed at the ACP that there is definitely need for a paradigm shift in the way we do things. This cannot continue. As I wrap up, just to also mention that other areas which have been highlighted in our discussions, which also relate to the topic today, relate to, among others, one, the issue of finance. We have said we need to address the issue of facilitating access to finance. If you're going to talk about value addition, you definitely need to facilitate access so that the enterprises are able to access that finance, not just any finance, but finance that will enable them actually procure equipment which they need for value addition. Another element is the issue of digitalization. Digitalization, very, very important. Can you imagine if the agriculture sector, we mainstream digitalization in the agriculture sector? This would actually act as an incentive to the youth to move into the agriculture sector. Because currently the youth look at the agriculture sector as being a sector that is for the old. It's hard to be in the agriculture sectors. But if you bring in the element of digitalization, that can actually work as an incentive. Of course, climate change, we can't run away. So climate change, agriculture, trade, how do we deal the interface there? Then, of course, we need smart policies that are going to facilitate the issue of trade. And lastly, public-private partnership platforms that will facilitate the exchange between the public sector and the private sector. As I conclude, I hope that this highly, and I underline, highly summarized presentation that I've made on the post-Cotonou has given you a flavor on ongoing discussions. I therefore look forward to the presentations this morning and wish you fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, and indeed, thank you very much to the ambassadors and ACP representatives with us this morning, as well as with the Commission. When I said we co-organize with EuropeAid, you will have presentations later on, but we also had a great input, of course, DG Trade, as well as DG Agri, who some of the representatives are in the room. So now, without a delay, IFPRI, O.Badiane actually is the director of the International Food Policy Research Institute for Africa. So we will have Antoine presenting the details of the report, the findings this year. But as a co-organizer, he couldn't join us. He's in Washington. He couldn't get online today, but he has a very short video to present. I will escape his biodata. He's a very distinguished researcher. We work very closely with him. I like him very much. He's very committed to strengthen also the capacity of African researchers on trade. This is why we are so attached to the Africa Agriculture Trade Monitor, because it uses the AgroDep trade capacity, which is African researchers, which is also what you want. So if we could just have a few minutes of O.Badiane video. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is O.Badiane. I'm the Director for Africa at the International Food Policy Research Institute. My team here at IFPRI leads the publications of the Africa Agriculture Trade Monitor, which is being presented here today to you. And this we do in collaboration with CTA. And like last year, with the 2018 edition, we're having this session here in Brussels, which is for us a pleasure and an honor to share the content and the findings of the 2019's Trade Monitor. We initiated it several years ago with the CTA team and others who are wondering, talking to ourselves and looking around and noticing there was actually not a specific publication dedicated to trade, agricultural trade in particular in Africa. Yes, we used to deal with trade when we talk about nutrition. We deal with trade when we talk about food security. We deal with trade when we talk about climate change. We deal with trade when we talk about agribusiness and value chains development. But trade as such has really never gathered galvanized attention in the way it deserved. and the launching of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, if it was necessary, has demonstrated to everybody the importance of trade as part of the development process in Africa. So we launched this series together with CTA and other collaborators and partners. The interesting thing about the Africa Trade Monitor is that it's being published, prepared together with a network of Africa-based African experts, top-notch economists and modelers who are organized and work together under one umbrella, the African Growth and Development Policy Modeling Consortium, AGRODEP. Those members from 30 countries in Africa, more than 230 of them, work together with IFPRI scientists and others to do a lot of things, one of which is the publication of the Africa Agro-Trade Monitor. Since last year, they've come together and created a smaller network just dedicated to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So we are pleased doubly to have the publication, and we're also pleased to have this publication together with African experts who are leading the work together with us. As we move towards implementing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, there are going to be a lot of questions related to modalities, to instruments, to measuring, to tracking, to perhaps even settling disputes. Having a good understanding, a good set of facts and data that help us to better know the realities on the ground, all of that is going to be extremely important. And we see the Trade Monitor being right at the heart of it, getting the African expertise to work together with African policymakers and organizations to bring the data and the evidence that's necessary to help us all make sure that the Continental Free Trade Area becomes a success, that we know how to make it beneficial for everybody, that we understand where the impediments are and we find the solutions that will make this a true success. So I would like to wish you all very productive deliberations here today, and I very much look forward to being part of the briefings next year with the 2020 edition of the Africa Agriculture Trade Monitor, which is going to be looking very much in terms of ex-ante analysis of where we see the Continental Free Trade Area going, what are possible potential benefits, potential pitfalls to pay attention to, and how we can harness the dynamism, the energy, the potential in Africa's agribusiness value chain and Africa's markets to make sure that this is a very positive factor in moving growth, development, and indeed improvement of livelihoods across the continent. So thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you very much. For the gentlemen, there are seats on the front if you can send them. So thank you very much. You have actually the trade report, the 2019, in your folders for the English part. For the French, which is being done, we have translated the executive summary. And in addition to specific topics, we also have a specific geographical focus per year. So our last speaker for the opening remarks, because I don't think my director will make it this morning, is T.Sauler, from Deputy Head of Development Policy at the Permanent Representation of Germany here in Brussels. We are very pleased to have you with us. As I said before, we work closely with BMZ and with GIZ on a number of issues, of course, related to agriculture, always greatly and very efficiently. I learned this morning that you speak very well French. Very, very well, completely fluent. So I'm sorry that I don't speak a word of German, but not one single, perhaps for next time. But in 2013, after several years of experience at BMZ, you also collaborated work at Sanko, so it's very important for us on all the food safety issues for this topic. You work with BMZ, of course, in a very, very important initiative to all of us, which is One World, No Hunger. And since 2016, you are based here at the German Permanent Representation. So, team, welcome, and I thank you also all you colleagues who have been interacting with and supporting us.
Thank you, Isolina, for your nice opening remarks, also concerning my French language skills. I will still speak in English if that is fine. I believe there's a translation for those who prefer French. Yeah, I'm very delighted, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. It's a pleasure. I'm very delighted here to attend this meeting, also as a co-host in my capacity of representing BMZ and GIZ today. I will be quite brief because I'm sure there will be very interesting speakers on the panel, and so many people attending here, perhaps also waiting for getting engaged into the discussion. So I won't take you for long, but before I will do some introductory remarks, also touching a bit on the content. Let me first of all thank the organizing partners for the very good cooperation in preparing this briefing, especially Isolina and her team. Colleagues tell me, and it's not the first Brussels briefing that I'm attending here. It's always a pleasure to work with you, and I think attendance here shows great interest in this institution of the Brussels briefings. Well, there were many points already mentioned by previous speakers. I've been busy with post-Cotonou negotiations for the last 3 years, so I really would like to to add some words on this. But let me just start by saying that in our view, innovative and sustainable agricultural business models in Africa form the centerpiece for future-oriented African, European and German political agendas. Let me just mention the implementation of the Agenda 2063, as well as the action agenda of the third EU-AU Agriculture Ministerial Conference, or even the G20 compacts with Africa, last year's President Juncker's alliance with Africa, or even the German Marshall Plan with Africa. They all emphasize of the role of agribusiness, investment and trade. So it's really a topic very high on the political agenda. My home ministry, the BMZ, firmly believes that investment in agricultural trade and business development are needed to create income and employment opportunities in rural Africa. Many speakers also said that before. Therefore, it is important to review local agriculture, economic and trade policies to be able to ensure coherence. Supporting local competitiveness and regional trade is important to keep Africa's farmers in regional and global value chains. This is also essential to increase African shares of value addition along these chains. I think other speakers mentioned it before, it's really a key point. We already have some solutions. I think they're applied public-private partnerships, inclusive business models such as government-oriented contract farming provide already for good practices, development impacts and lessons learned for the future. Political focus, in our view, should be on the implementation of the Agenda 2063 that I mentioned before. Quite ambitious targets, but I believe also realistic because of the great ownership attached to it. Tripling inter-African trade through the reduction of trade barriers between neighboring countries with regard to the transit of agricultural and food products, customs administration, and the harmonization of rules and standards between neighboring countries, just to mention a few important goals. Also, regional economic bodies in Africa need to play a strong role and should develop creative development measures for fostering regional trade. BMZ, German Development Ministry, is highly involved in increasing the ability of African countries to participate in regional and global trade. Many projects are financed by German Development Corporation, especially by GIZ, in this area, and Germany is particularly committed to support its partners in the implementation of the African continental free trade area. I could also talk a lot about this. It is very high on the political agenda of my minister. We believe that is perhaps the most visionary and promising project by the AU and its member states, and we are really highly committed to support its implementation. Last point, I can be very brief, having had Usman as the previous speaker. In the past, let me say that sound databases was missing, and it was difficult to find reliable facts about agricultural trade in Africa. In 2018, it has been mentioned, IFPRI commissioned the first Africa Agricultural Trade Monitor. I don't have to go into details. It has been introduced already by the previous speakers, but it is, in our view, really a matter of concern, a high priority to fund also this important publication, and German Development Cooperation, GSZ, on behalf of BMZ, is financially contributing to 3 editions of the AATM from 2019 until 2021. Well, I think I leave it there. I see there's actually my neighbor is also from IFPRI and will elaborate probably a bit on this. So let me just thank you again for your participation. I would like to wish you a fruitful and successful meeting and a good discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you for recalling, yes, the support of, very important support of Germany to development and agriculture. As we all know that the EU is the major still donor and a contributor at the global level in times, actually, in challenging times where many, reduce their contribution. So while Felix will help to, yes, because the setup is not the usual one, so normally we don't have people changing seats. That's not what we use to do, but in that particular one we will have for the